Niall Wogan, do you think it's fair to say now that there is a sort of a culture of sickness in society, that we kind of need it and the pharmaceutical industry peddles it?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me on your show. And
you say that now, you might think that later on, but I wouldn't. Go on.
For starters, one question I'd like people to ask themselves, I'd like the viewers to ask themselves is, what do you think happens in the senior boardrooms of the major pharmaceutical companies? Is their main goal to improve the health of the nation, or are they under intense pressure to meet next quarter's profit forecasts? So we can see very quickly that at the highest levels the industry is centred around profit rather than health. So pharmaceuticals are based around profit, while medicine is based around helping people. One is self-interest, one is altruism.
But in terms of evidence, apart from an anecdotal boardroom discussion, okay? In terms of evidence, where's the evidence that the pharmaceutical industry is more interested in peddling products for profit than about medicine and care?
Well, you look at their budgets and where the money goes. We hear all this talk about how they need all this money for R&D to create new life-saving drugs. Now, the pharmaceuticals do create life-saving drugs which do help people, and we've got to understand that, and they're important to us. But most of the money goes towards sales and marketing. So we get about 14% of their revenue goes towards research and development, where it's up around 36% is... Goes
to marketing?
To marketing, yes.
So to convince me that drug A is better than drug B. And ultimately what you're saying is this, they might as well be selling cars.
It's not so black and white. There are drugs that are useful for people. We've got to accept that. But a lot of drugs are not useful for people. And we've now reached a stage where Western healthcare is now the third leading cause of death in the US. In the year 2000, the Journal of the American Medical Association published a study showing that Western healthcare is the third leading cause of death. Only heart disease and cancer kill more people.
Okay, so wait, explain that to me.
250,000 people a year are killed in the US by Western healthcare. Now, some of that is medical error, but when you look purely at pharmaceuticals, 106,000 people are killed by what is called the non-error negative effect of drugs. What does that mean in layman's terms? It means they gave you the right drug and it killed you.
Emer, when you hear someone like Niall, do you think there's some truth in this? Because many people are coming to the view that the pharmaceutical industry is just a giant industry, and our ill health is kind of fortuitous.
Well, in an ideal world, obviously, you would not have people making money out of drugs at all. You'd have the government funding research, getting their own set of drugs, and no profit would be made. But that just isn't possible. You know, obviously, drug companies do make money. But where would we be without them? And obviously, things are going to go wrong with drugs. But if you actually banned drug companies, where would you find the research? Where would the drugs come from?
It's a fair question, no?
I wouldn't suggest banning drug companies. We need drug companies. But what we don't need is the current paradigm where every little problem in life needs a drug. So I think there's a use for drug companies, but not the current use they've been put to.
Michael Curry? Every little problem in life needs a drug?
Well, my area is in psychiatry, and my area really is mental health. So I just see the use of medications in mental health causing immense harm. For instance, depression, the use of medication is huge. About 1 in 5 people in 2004 were prescribed antidepressant medication at a cost of between 100 million and 150 million.
1 in 5 people in general?
In general.
Are on antidepressant medication?
We're actually prescribed.
In this country?
In this country.
That's an enormous figure.
Yeah, a huge amount of people. We're talking hundreds of thousands of people have been prescribed antidepressant medication.
But is that because we're kind of convincing ourselves we're all sick?
Well, there's a problem with psychiatry, which is that we're inclined to see psychological problems as a disease, when in fact we know it's not a disease. A depression has to do with the slings and arrows of life, difficulties, bullying, abuse, sadness, grief, pain. These are the main reasons as to why people get depressed. And of course the most interesting thing about the disease model is if you get depressed, say you lose your job.
Sure.
And you get depressed.
It happens to me regularly. Okay. So it's fine. I've got over that.
Okay.
You lose your job, or somebody close to you dies, and you go into this downward spiral.
And you go across to your GP, and as you're about to get your prescription filled, the phone rings, and you're told not only have you got your job back, but you're promoted. Your depression lifts. Now that would not happen with renal disease, with cancer, with diabetes. So we're not actually dealing with a disease, we're dealing with a distress, we're dealing with a state. So the disease model is not actually working in psychiatry.
So, Con Clisman, when you hear a psychiatrist saying that the disease model is not working and that 1 in 5 are prescribed drugs to balance them, i.e. to antidepressant drugs, it does seem that there's a good case to answer on the part of the pharmaceutical industry.
I think the pharmaceutical industry would never wish any of its products to be used inappropriately. And if you're suggesting that there's an inappropriate use by doctors,
it's the doctor's fault.
Well, I'm going to come on to you now in a second.
I think the doctors would wish to address that. We are licensed as to how we manufacture our products and also what they may be used for. And none of our manufacturers would wish that their products are used outside the terms of those licenses.
Yeah, but again, if I come back, Emer, I know medics who are constantly barraged with invitations from the pharmaceutical industry down to Adair Manor, play a bit of golf, and look, we've got this new thing, and if you play ball with us and you sign up your punters or your patients, this drug is the drug for you. I mean, there is a dreadful proximity between yourselves and yourselves that looks like a conspiracy from the outside.
Well, that's true, and I think in any job you are open to corruption in that regard. And in fact, it would be very easy to be corrupt as a doctor, because if you were offered incentives to prescribe, how do they know you prescribe them at all anyway? Actually, they have ways of checking whether you prescribe them or not.
Well, can we come back to the idea that doctors, the pharmaceutical industry, is the biggest exporter in this country? It's probably the biggest industry on its own in this country. Okay, and the fact that Irish doctors are probably far too close to them, that they're not convinced necessarily by the drug, but it's more by the little junket that the particular drug peddler gives the doctor for him or her to peddle it on to the patients.
Well, I think you can separate it in two areas. If people are going to be corrupt, they're going to be corrupt anyway, whether they're doctors or bankers or anybody else. So if somebody comes to me and tells me about a drug or offers me, they haven't done, but a week in their manner, it's entirely in my conscience how I perceive that. Now, you can argue, of course, that they wouldn't do it unless it works.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I was going to argue that. But
yeah, exactly. Why would they invite people to Adair Manor if they didn't think it was going to influence them? Yeah. So you can argue that. But at the same time, like any system in life, if somebody comes into me and wants a prescription for something, it is my professional judgment. If you're saying that the pharmaceutical industry, who are now very carefully regulated in respect of this, and in fact their attitude to it now is very different, which is that they want a professional relationship with you, not like in the old days.
Well, do you think that we are, as a society, as Niall said, over-dependent on drugs?
Well, it's what do you mean by that? You know, and again, the antidepressant thing is a very important thing. I mean, do you believe that antidepressants don't work? Is that what you feel?
I'm saying to say that it's a disease is wrong. To say to somebody, I'm prescribing you medication to give you a lift, to alter your mood, to calm you down. But to say that somebody has a disease worries people. I have people coming to me.
But do you believe that antidepressants don't work?
In some cases they don't work at all.
Okay,
the
in some
trials
cases.
are there.
But is there a place for prescribing antidepressants?
If antidepressants are used, it's very important that we tell the person exactly the purpose.
Yeah.
What they're inclined to be told is, you have a chemical imbalance, you have a disease, I'm serious, Emer, and you may have to take this medication for the rest of your life.
But the fact of the matter is,
you
can't on the one hand say that you shouldn't prescribe antidepressants if in fact you believe they can work.
Emer, have you got my point? Are we dealing with a disease or are we dealing with a distress?
Well, we know that depression is a reaction to life events. We also know
but are we saying it's not a disease?
As a result of that reaction to life events, we have an alteration in serotonin levels.
That has never been proved.
Well, we know that...
In fact, the FDA in America are banning that use of that term. We're talking about chemicals.
So you say you would never prescribe antidepressants?
If I had my way, I would never prescribe
But you do have your way.
I do have my way.
And do you never prescribe antidepressants?
I have prescribed on 3 occasions at request of patients. And on each occasion...
At the request of the patient?
Yes.
Well, why would you do it at the request
because
of the patient?
I feel the side effects are dangerous. There are... yes, Emma, I'm sorry.
You prescribed it at the request of a patient?
Yes. Yes.
So the patient told you, I want antidepressants?
No, the patients that came along and said,